WCEG Network on WCEG Talk Radio.com. Click the Livestream tab or watch us live on your smart TV, YouTube, WCEG Network. I'm Dr. Wanzo, your host for the next hour of Mind Matters, and we are the worldwide community empowerment group where we speak life into the community. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and on Instagram at WCEG_talk_radio and at WCEG Network. Last but not least, the topics and opinions are those of the show host and guests and not WCEG Network. Thank you for your continued support. Good evening. Welcome to Mind Matters, where we discuss relevant mental health issues. I'm your host, Dr. Wanzo. I'm a psychiatrist practicing in Atlanta for the past 30 years. Our co-hosts are Norm Carter Jr. He's a retired Philadelphia police corporal who's written a book that's very relevant to these times entitled The Long Blue Walk, My Journey as a Philly Cop. It's available on Amazon. He also hosts his own show on WCEG, Issues and Answers, Mondays at 4 p.m. Hi, Norm.
Hello, how are you, doctor?
And then we have Officer Paul Devine, who's been with us since the inception of the show. He has over 20 years of experience in law enforcement. We're affectionately known as the Doc and the Cop. He is currently in Brunswick covering the Ahmaud Arbery trial. Hey, Paul. Can you hear us? Hey, Paul. Oh, you muted, I think. Paul?
Hey, Doc.
Okay. All right. So our topic this evening is the psychology of crowds. Panic and then desperation spread through the crowd of 50,000, mostly young people, just as the popular hometown rapper they had come to see, Travis Scott, took the stage. This happened this past Friday night. It came like a wave, an unstoppable movement of bodies that could not be held back. Some collapsed. Others fought for air. Concert goers lifted up the unconscious bodies of friends and strangers and surfed them over the top of the crowd, hoping to send them to safety. Others shouted out for help and pleaded for the concert to stop. It kept going. In the end, 8 people died, ranging in age from 14 to 27. Hundreds were treated for injuries at the field hospital at the concert venue, which became overwhelmed. Others were, if the ambulances could get to them, were transported to local hospitals. Among those treated is a 9-year-old named Ezra Blunt, who was trampled by the crowd when he fell off his father's shoulders. His father became unconscious and the kid fell off his shoulders and got trampled by the crowd. Right now, he's in a medically induced coma with injuries to all of his organs. By Saturday, the officials in Houston were at a loss to explain how a concert, which was part of a 2-day music festival organized by Live Nation and Travis Scott, had transformed in an instant from a celebration to a struggle for life to a mass casualty event. So too with concert goers. They described a thrust of the crowd would not let up as Mr. Scott took the stage at 9 p.m. One concert goer said, "It was like hell. Everybody was just in the back trying to rush to the front. I was fighting for my life. There was no way out. This event is one of the deadliest crowd-controlled disasters at a concert in the United States for many years. Similar episodes have occurred in venues around the world. In 1979, there was a Who concert in Cincinnati where 11 people died as concert goers rushed the entrance. Germany in 2010, at an electronic dance festival, 18 people were trapped and crushed. So investigators are still looking into the surge, the crowd surge, and they're reviewing videos to find out what happened. There was even a security officer who was pricked in the neck with a needle, who went unconscious. They gave him Narcan, and he was revived. What is crowd psychology? It's also known as herd mentality, mob mentality, pack mentality. It describes how people are influenced by their peers to adopt certain behaviors. In a crowd, a person, an individual, loses their sense of self. They lose their individual responsibility. They sink to the lowest common level of primitive emotions. They're incapable of reasoning. So I just want to get some input, like maybe, I know, Paul, just in case you go out, maybe since you're on now, if you have any input to all of this. Paul? Uh-oh.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Let's see, let's try. Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me?
It's not coming through.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So it's not coming through, Paul. Mhm. Okay. So we're gonna have to maybe try you later, Paul. Norm, your reactions to what's been going on?
Well, I was going to say that the following quote from a news source says, police said Scott encouraged people to rush the stage and bypass the security protocols, which resulted into injuries. Now, this was in 2017.
Yes.
Or in Arkansas.
Mhm.
And it seems as though he has a reputation
Yes.
for doing this. And also that just prior to the concert, he encouraged his people to come in and bypass security. And they actually had a large number of people, or a fair amount of people, rush the security gates at the beginning of the concert to gain entrance inside. And so this is why he is being held partially accountable for this. In addition to the security guard, there were some other people who were also stuck with the needle at this. So some of this is people setting about to do just what, to encourage exactly what happened.
Yeah, he's been arrested twice before for inciting riots at his concerts. One, like when he encouraged people to jump off a 3-story balcony into the crowd, and the guy was partially paralyzed, and he's got an ongoing lawsuit now. This guy that's paralyzed, but he's been arrested twice. One was at a Lollapalooza concert in Chicago, where he encouraged the same behavior to storm the barricades, ignore security, and several people were injured. He was ended up being arrested. So twice he's been arrested for inciting violence at his concerts. And I really didn't, the only thing I knew about him before this incident was that he was involved with one of the Kardashians, and that's about all I knew about him.
Right.
But I did read a lot, and they said that he's notorious for having concerts that teeter on mayhem, and that he encourages the raging, where they rage, and the mosh pits, because they said there were mosh pits at this concert. I really didn't even know what a mosh pit was. I had to ask my son, and he said, "Well, it's like," and he showed me a video of people like running into each other, hitting people, knocking people down, and he said he has friends that were injured in mosh pits. But yeah, I don't understand, the reasoning behind that. But they said there were mosh pits at this concert, and that he is into something called horror gangster rap. I wasn't familiar with that before, but I looked at a couple of his videos, and it was all about violence killing people. So that's, I think he set the tone for, what happened, because you've had other huge crowds and nothing has happened with those. I don't know if Officer Paul, are you able to talk? Because he's had some experience with crowd control.
It looks like he's trying
I'm
to
trying
talk.
to,
Okay,
yeah, I am.
good. Keep talking. Oh,
I love punk rock.
okay.
March pits, slams, raves, whatever you know, Travis. I'm you that is not a culture that is new. I attended many of those high school, going through college, and the excitement of jumping together and bumping. Are you familiar with a hip hop group called Onyx back in the day?
No.
Okay. Onyx was one of my favorite rap groups. And they started merging hip hop with punk rock. And when we went to the concerts, it was high energy, it was spirited, mosh pit, slam dancing, whatever you want to call it, it's the same. One of the things I had from this whole event was, you're talking 50,000 people. Please explain to me why minors, 9, 10, 14, early teens, what are they doing there? If Travis Scott concerts, as you say, Doc, was violence incited, shouldn't it have been 16 years and older?
I agree. Even his girlfriend, Kylie Jenner, and their little daughter, I think she's like 3 or 4, she was there. They were there too. His girlfriend and his little daughter was there.
But I'm sure they weren't part of the general crowd.
No, they were in a VIP tent. They were in a VIP tent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're watching this concert from a very close location.
Right.
And, I just come off working the World Series.
Yeah.
This is a major, major sporting event. Crowd control for us was, we went into preventive mode in the third game in Atlanta that Sunday, because we were fearing if Atlanta won Sunday night and won the third, we were already prepared for riot conditions. We had barriers set up. We had units from different agencies staged up in unified commands. And because people, when they get excited, even when they're happy, it's not just when they're mad they riot. People riot when they're happy, when they want to celebrate. That energy is dangerous to everybody. And we did not have enough law enforcement. We didn't have enough security. We didn't even have enough protocols in place that we contain 100,000 or more people who wanted to tear up the city because they celebrate winning a World Series. So you gotta ask yourself, 1,000 people at a hip hop concert. And if the Travis Scott, was notorious for bringing this kind of energy to his concerts, then why were there minors there? And why did promoters not have enough protocols and security in place to deal with the potential of what could happen?
The police chief said they had more people at this concert than they had when the World Series was at the World Series games in Houston. He said they had more people there.
And you got to keep in mind, with the pandemic winding down, people still feel like they would shake it off cabin fever.
Exactly, definitely.
50,000 people at a rap concert is crazy. And keep in mind, this is a rap hip hop concert. At least 70% of the crowd was Caucasian. Take that in consideration. So that shows you the crossover hip hop mentality. Human, majority of people claim to be sheep, and then you have sheep follow. Is that not the foundation of a search or out of control crowd?
Can you repeat that? Is what not the foundation?
Well, I said there's a thing called sheep mentality.
Right, the herd mentality.
In other words,
yes,
the herd mentality, and sheep is so often used because sheep will always follow the head, no matter. They will always follow. Well, in human nature, in the middle of concerts, well, we used to call it bum rushing back in the day. When we wanted to a club and they were waiting too long to let us in, Well, security at the door couldn't stop 10 to 200, 300 of us who we pushed at the doors and we get inside. And they certainly couldn't identify and get us all out. But at the end of the day, we knew we was going to do it. We used to look forward to doing it. As a matter of fact, that's part of the excitement of going out when I was younger, because we get out there and we act like complete morons just for the sake of the excitement of getting away with something.
So did you participate in mosh pits?
Heck yeah.
Really?
I've done a lot of mosh pits. Yeah.
I thought that was a white thing.
But that's when I brought up Onyx back in the day in the hip hop crowd. That was, Onyx was the first Black hardcore rap group that was crossing over into punk rock. Mosh pits came out of punk rock. And people keep forgetting, we're talking 20, 30 years ago. Yeah, we used to hit, you ever heard of rave? So you've been to a rave?
No.
Okay. See, that's what happened when there's out of touch between the age gap comes in. And I know you're young at heart, Doc, but I'm telling you, I used to love going to those.
So what exactly is a rave? What is a rave exactly?
A rave
is
literally the same as a party where it's like being or yourself. That's when drugs such as Molly and others along the line came popular, because would drop acid or drop Molly or something, and they would literally just be out of control. Used to have a lot of fatalities and casualties at waves too, because people would get dehydrated, especially when alcohol and drugs are mixed. And there have been deaths. There have been people and have they surge mentality? Absolutely. I have participated in those where I went from being one of those enjoying it to now I'm giving emergency first aid to somebody who passed out or somebody who went into a diabetic shock or coma. Because, people with pre-existing health conditions shouldn't be at these kind of events because it's high energy, is drug, alcohol use is prevalent. And at the end of the day, rapid medical attention is almost non-existent.
They said like the medical facilities were overwhelmed. People were dying of suffocation, cardiac arrest.
Yeah, that's what usually happens when you run out of oxygen and you can't breathe in a crowd.
Exactly. Wow. But what, I guess I don't understand it. I really don't.
Well, I'm pretty sure Norm worked this share of events in his career. Even like we do the Peachtree Road race here. You're talking about 100,000 people who expect the ones who. So Norm, in your years, I'm sure you were races and sporting events where there's hundreds of thousands of people present.
I did never experience anything like this. There's a whole different mentality in this generation, and this is part of the lack of civility that we have now. And I just wanted to quote something that I read recently, and this is from a psychologist from the United Kingdom. Violent mosh pits and chaotic crowds were first features of the 80s punk scene, which he said, when fans, usually male, would thrash and collide to heavy metal and hardcore grunge, a result of fans experiencing, quote, a shared euphoria and sense of emotional closeness, which Paul also indicated. And this came from psychologists in the UK. It was published. And that this guy cultivates that. And I remember the scene where they showed Travis Scott on stage as the ambulance was trying to enter. And his response to that was just absolutely crazy. And after they arrived there, he still continued the show for another 30 minutes.
Exactly.
So, and there were people running up on stage telling them to stop the concert, and he refused to do that. So he bears some responsibility.
Exactly. And they were asking why the police didn't stop it. The police said if they had stopped it, there would have been a riot. That's why they didn't stop it, because they said there would have been a riot if they had stopped it.
So in all respect, this is more than a Travis Scott responsibility. This is an overall, every stakeholder shares some responsibilities.
Exactly.
Because you had those who wouldn't have wanted to stop even if they saw people suffering. You had law enforcement that was powerless to stop it because they're afraid the trial would turn violent. You have a performer who, if he's notorious for this, then promoters should have had adequate protocols in place. At the end of the day, you know, again, in the United States of America, sometimes all these rights that we have work against you when it comes down to common decency and sense of human response. We, the people, are our own worst enemy on a lot of levels. It's easy to blame somebody for something like this, but how often do we look at ourselves and say, hell, not only those of us who participated, but all those who promoted and profited off it, as well as those of us who are responsible for public safety.
Right.
Did we do all we could to provide a safe environment for everybody involved?
Exactly.
Right.
The Houston police chief said he visited Travis Scott in his trailer before the show and was expressing concerns about the energy in the crowd. This is supposedly what the police chief did, but and they were saying they had all these plans for like medical issues, but they had not planned for crowd surge. There's nothing in writing in their plans about crowd surge. They had made no plans for that at all.
Yeah.
And that's where they have fought, because if Travis for me. So is it really just a Travis Scott issue, or is it a failure on all parties what was potentially possible?
So what could have been done to prevent this? What could have been done to prevent this?
Nothing. This is what the people wanted. There's nothing that could have prevented this.
Oh, come on, Paul. There has to be something that could have prevented this. I can't believe there's nothing that could have been done.
Okay, if there was nothing, it would have happened, right?
Well, no, not necessarily, but I'm saying, obviously, you know, he feeds off of that. Travis feeds off of that. And if the police chief went to him and expressed concerns, it seems to me that they should have made some plans to do more. But I'm just saying, what kind of plans could they have made to prevent this?
Not allow the concert to happen.
Exactly. I think there was something like 700 or 800 security and police personnel there on the scene.
Right. They said they had more than they had for the World Series. They had more presence in the World Series.
So that was what could have prevented it, not allowing the concert to happen. That was the bottom line. Because you got to keep in mind, this was a voluntary event. People paid to be there. People brought themselves, they brought their family, they brought minors. So again, go back to we the people. Prohibition, the war on drugs, the war on terrorism. If people are determined to do something, what can you do to prevent it? The war on drugs is going on its 40th year, and we're nowhere near stopping decreasing drug use. Recreational drug use. Look at what fentanyl is doing to society right now. But yet, the more people die, the more people want it.
Exactly. That's true. But I'm saying, like the World Series, though, I mean, what did y'all do at the World Series to prevent that kind of chaos and riots? I mean, obviously, you all did something to prevent it because nothing happened. So what did y'all do?
One of the things about the World Series that we were able to control, we kept people in sections. You know, you assigned to a seat. You're not down on the floor. You don't have free access and movement. That was one thing. Second of all, we had situations where people were screened, and the prices to get into these venues were so high that most of the people coming had to be very affluent just to be there in the first place. So that takes away the pack mentality, because most of them are used to being able to enjoy the freedom of the income to be where they are. Second of all, major. You could crowd movement was only in coming in and two concessions. There was no access to the field. There was no access to the player. There was no access to our VIP areas.
But what about like the Battery area where people who didn't have tickets were in the Battery area? What about that area?
And see, and that's the area that was most concerned for us, because if Atlanta would have won game 3 Sunday, we have already had barriers set up. We have already had protocols in place for riot controls, not just surge mentality, but riot control. But still, there was not enough police, no matter what jurisdiction believed, that could have stopped damn near 50, 60,000 people. We've already made concessions. There's going to be collateral damage. There was not enough units to arrest everybody. You look at what took place at the Capitol June 6th. With all the presence of law enforcement, even though there should have been more, there was no way they could have stopped that surge. And this is the same kind of situation. It was a surge of humanity that would determine or achieve a goal. And what could have been done to predict January 6th? Well, we can always Monday morning quarterback and say, well, we should have did this, we should have had that. But nothing really would have stopped that humanity from moving forward because no one anticipated getting to the level that it did.
You talking about with the Travis Scott, with the Astro World?
A concert. People got free movement.
Mhm.
There's no barriers. There's no protocols in place to deal with crowd control other than saying we got police there. We got a few fences, rate gates up. You got to keep in mind, those in back in concerts always will move forward if they get an opportunity to. Things in this world that you can't stop once you get rolling. That's dam burst and humanity moving forward in such a way where they're determined. Once to get rolling, it's like a stampede of cattle. You get out of the way if you want to survive, because you're not going to stop it from moving.
That's what I'm saying. Like the bodies were piling up, and people were trampling over. People were piling up bodies, and people like the little 9-year-old, he got trampled. I mean, just that.
So,
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, but think about it. When people panic, and you add that to the energy of mass movement, now you got uncontrolled chaos. Before, when people were following rules and regulations, and we had them herding in place, we had controlled chaos. Both of those are energy.
Exactly.
It's like physics. You know, every object has an equal and opposite reaction. If you hit a vehicle standing still at 30 miles an hour, you're going to get ejected through that windshield of the car, and your body will still be traveling at 30 miles an hour.
Right.
You know, and fatalities, accidents where people ejected from the vehicle, it's not the accident that kills them. It's the blunt force trauma to when our soft human bodies hit something solid that results in the blunt force trauma that destroys our internal organs that at the end of the day, let's face it, we are fragile creatures.
Yes, yes.
And getting trampled, as you stated earlier in the show, concerts and surges and crowd mentality is nothing new in this world.
Right, right.
So when you say, what can we do to stop it? Apparently not much, because we haven't learned from other concerts 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago how to stop and prevent this.
I think that one of the things that we're dealing with, and as I'm looking at it, because I'm a lot older than most of you, is that what we're seeing is an ineffective attempt to recreate Woodstock. And that was
absolutely
that was totally different. There were thousands of people there. There was none of this kind of nonsense. I mean, mostly because most of them were too high to do anything. But the people weren't there to destroy. The whole mentality was everybody was there to have a good time. They had their little area set up. Everybody had their little area, and it was basically peaceful by this type of thing. But doctor, we had a program earlier this year where we talked about how a mob or a crowd sometimes can take on its own personality.
Exactly.
Totally different from the people who are making up the crowd, and that becomes like a new person.
Exactly.
It's actually a being. And
ladies and gentlemen, let's not forget lynch mobs and what that was to this country. And keep in mind, lynch mobs were made a good church-going Christian people who considered themselves doing God's work. Mind yourself what a lynching is. And you say to yourself, how could people who consider themselves God-fearing, one of the commandments, thou shalt not kill, actively participate in lynch mobs, believing they doing God's work again?
And bringing their children.
These were community events.
They brought the children.
And the atrocities that were committed, you have to ask yourself, how did these so-called high and mighty Christians live with themselves knowing that you just destroyed a life in the most vicious way possible? But yet you call other people savages.
Always remember that during those times when lynch mobs were popular, that the people there and the people committing the lynchings looked at African Americans as non-humans,
exactly,
or less than human. Exactly. So they weren't killing a human being.
Exactly.
They were killing an end, and it's just like when you go to war. The first thing you do when you go into combat is you dehumanize your enemy. Okay. That's why in every war, in every conflict, that the enemy was called some dehumanizing name. Exactly. So you were killing, and I won't get into all the pejorative names that they use, but you were killing a thing and not a person. So as long as you looked at that Black person, that African person, as a thing, then it's easy. It has nothing to do with your Christian beliefs, because it's just like killing a pig,
exactly,
or killing a chicken.
Exactly.
That's the way they treated us. So the mob mentality filters in there because these people weren't acting in a reasonable manner. But yeah.
Yeah, but I think like the energy of, like you say, the energy in Woodstock compared to the energy in this astral world. I was thinking about, I really don't like crowds and I try to avoid crowds.
Same here.
But the biggest crowd that I went to the Obama inauguration 2009 in Washington, D.C. There were 1.8 million people. We were out there in that mall, 1.8 million people. And what I felt there was a feeling of love and cooperativeness and friendly. Everybody was there to help each other. It was all about love. It was the most positive environment. So with 1.8 million people, there was no, anything negative. It was all positive. Everybody just had a wonderful, everybody was helpful, and it was just like being in heaven or something. It was just a wonderful atmosphere. It was.
Yep.
But you got to keep in mind, that was 1.8 million people who waited 400 plus years for that moment.
Well, no,
1.8 million
into the mall, that mall area, the DC mall, 1.8 million people squeezed into that mall.
Yeah. Also keep in mind, and there's additional history, especially with us, when we had the Dr. Martin Luther King speech.
Yes.
His speech, there were several 100,000 people there.
Yes.
Also, you had the Million Man March, which had several 100,000 people there.
Well, let me tell you, I looked at Million Man March. The park police said 400,000. The organizers said 1.5 to 2 million were there. That's the organizers versus park police.
I saw it on TV. They weren't that many.
Well, my son went there. My son was there in high school, and he went. And he says,
I got to agree with Norm. It was not, don't get me wrong. It was a lot of brothers on a common cause, but it wasn't that. It wasn't.
Well, I'm telling you, it was packed. He said it was so packed that if you had to leave to go to the bathroom, my son said they actually physically lifted his body up and surfed him through the crowd so he could get to the bathroom because he said it was so packed.
Yeah.
I see. I'm going to take Norm on this one. Norm, if I'm any place where I got to be body surfed to use the restroom, trust me, I'm getting the hell out of Dodge.
So, the park police say 400,000 is what they say for the Million Man March. Is what the park police say 400,000. So
at the end of the day, even 200 people, 100 people, 50 people in a tight environment can be a threat to your safety. We fail to keep in mind that crowds are more unpredictable than a runaway car. I don't know how many of y'all spent time in black clothes back in the 80s, 90s, when I was out there clubbing. But listen, you had somebody yell gun and we hear shooting. Hey, listen, we wilding out because it becomes self-survival. And man, it was nothing to be at a club having a good time, drinking, having, dancing. And all you need is one little incident or people yell gun, everybody. Because I was out there clubbing, got old enough to club during the start of the crack epidemic in the early to mid 80s. Even drugs and murder and everything else couldn't keep us from going out and having a good time. And to be honest with you, there have been many clubs I've been to that the party ended before it started because of shootings, fights, and a crowd will stampede. Smartest thing to do when a crowd stampede, whatever direction is going, move in that direction. And I gotta tell you, hug a wall. Why? If you're going in the direction of the crowd and you're hugging a wall, you don't have to worry about defending yourself from every other side. Second, what it allows you to do, being the most dangerous part of a stampeding crowd is the middle of that crowd. The edges are the safest. Why? Because everybody's trying to move forward in the biggest area possible. That's the middle. You hanging on the edge and moving with the crowd, not against it, because you're going to get trampled. You move crowd, whatever direction I swim with it, and eventually it will release you. Crowd surges is not new to me. Like I told you, Onyx, we used to have a great time at them concerts. Did I expect it to turn wild and go crazy, whether because of a fight or people wild? Of course I did. That was the whole purpose of going. Hate to say it, but you didn't go there dressed to impress. You go there dressed because we're going to turn out to be something crazy. But that was the excitement of it. That's the reason people skydive. That's the reason people jet ski. That's the reason Evel Knievel jumped the Grand Canyon, because there's that risk factor. For whatever reason, it excites you. And, for some people, they want to live their life safe. For others, I'm just saying. And I'm sure Norm been there. Norm,
No.
don't turn away, Norm.
No.
You hear me? You hear me, Norm?
No. You can ask.
Philly got some crazy clubs back in the day, Norm.
I will tell you, you were exactly right, and I didn't go to them. There were any place that was advertised on the radio, I never went to, because these were the places where there was always trouble.
Gotcha.
When the news goes out that there's an event going on, did I go to clubs? I went to a lot of clubs, but they were never on the popular crowd's radar. And trust me, I had great times. I never believed in crowds. In fact, when my children were coming up, they will tell you that I would not allow them to go to rap concerts. They didn't go to rap concerts until, no, I don't think they ever went, because by the time they became older, that wasn't on their radar, except my youngest daughter went to, they had this thing up in Philadelphia, which they used to have in Atlanta. I forget the name of it.
But it was crazy.
No, Greek.
Greek Fest.
Yeah, which was another exercise in insanity. And once she had experienced the one that I told her not to go to, and once she had experienced that, she never went to another one. Those were out of control mobs. And
they were.
And people went there for the out of controlness of it. And people died.
Yes.
People got raped. That was the big thing. Rapes were popular in those things.
Keep in mind, Atlanta had Freaknik. And I admit,
same thing.
Even growing up, you have Freaknik, you have Spring Fling, and that Portsmouth, Virginia Beach area. And unfortunately, focusing on all of these popular minority events back in the day, every year we look forward to it. When I got old enough that me and my crew started rolling into it, listen, from Great Freck to Spring Fling to Freaknik, I gotta tell you, it became like a rite of passage because you're old enough. We were taking road trip. I remember when we left Hartford heading down to Freaknik in Atlanta for the first time long before I moved here. We talk about 8, 9, 10 brothers deep. All I know, we were rolling down south. All of us born and bred in them, but we rolling down south looking for a good time in women.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I remember clearly, and everybody tries to forget, that prior to Freaknik, that nonsense was held in Virginia Beach.
Oh, yeah.
And the people in Virginia Beach ended it because they called in the National Guard, and the National Guard went in there and did nothing but crack heads.
Right.
And that was the end of it. They never went back to Virginia Beach.
Right.
They went to a place that tolerated that nonsense, like Atlanta. And when Atlanta got tired of it and they threw them out of Atlanta, they went to Philadelphia. Until Philadelphia, yes, they did. And they
actually, I think it was long before, because when I was in school, we used to go to Philly for it was called Greek Fest back then, before they really started popping off in Atlanta, because Greek Fest was big long before Freaknik started in Atlanta. And the only reason I know, because my girlfriend at the time, coming out of high school, her older brothers and sisters and them, that's how we ended up going, because we were too young to drink. And we certainly were well under 18 at the time. But rolling with them, we had the time of our lives, because we were acting grown, doing things that we should. I mean, it was an out of control party that at the end of the day, if you survived it, you thought you had the greatest time of your life.
But you know what? We laugh about it and smile about it, but none of us were raped. None of us were killed. So those type of events invite that. They invite that. And the people who attend these events are cover for those people who have those criminal intentions in mind. And you can't be part of the cover. And that's hard for people to understand and hard to grasp. And that's sad. And the same thing you have here with this concert in Houston. Those people went there some people went to have a good time, not realizing they were cover for people who were ready to participate in illegal stuff and do things that cost people lives. You might lose, some idiot took his 9-year-old kid there.
Yes.
That type of nonsense. And these are the type of people who attend these events, people who don't think critically, people who cannot think for themselves, people who cannot look at a crowd of 50,000 people and say, you know what, it might not be a good idea to go in there.
And to take your 10-year-old child, 9-year-old child.
Yeah. These are people with limited reasoning ability. Sorry to say that, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
I'm feeling you. I had a unique experience on both sides of the fence, because the first 2 Freakniks I had here, the first one came in, I told you, coming down with my boys hanging out, we wowed out. Not even gonna lie to you. The mosh pit, as they call it back in the day, we were calling it bum rush. There's a club called in Atlanta back in the day called the World Club. Then it was the Phoenix first in the World Club. I mean, Onyx was hot. We were wilding out to the best of our ability.
You said you had mosh pits. You said you had mosh pits then.
It was a mosh pit. They used to call it slam dancing. We just called it bum rushing and wilding out.
See, I didn't know blacks did that. See, that's why I'm surprised. I didn't know.
That was heavy. And and then we went to the second year. By that time I was in the academy. But still, I got to enjoy Freaknik as I was still like that young brother college student. Well, the very next year, I had 2 years, the last 2 years of Freaknik officially being in Atlanta, I was somebody's officer. So now, instead of enjoying the party, my first one, I was working a roadblock at Lee and Oak Street off of I-20, preventing them from getting off the highway, coming down off the AU Center. And it was so weird because the girls were still up there dancing naked on the car, shake, dancing, whatever. But we confined everybody on the highway. We literally trapped Freaknickers on the highway. And the crazy thing about it, looking back at it, I went from enjoying it, being part of that crowd, now being part of law enforcement trying to control that crowd. It was so out of control that we were trying to shift units, constantly trying to shut down highway. we literally had to sacrifice this interstate circling the city, and we kept every exit blocked off. We made it let them congregate in the area, knew it was never going to get out. By my second year, Freaknik was on the end, because you had a mayor come in named Bill Campbell who declared war on Freaknik and basically said, "You're not welcome to Atlanta." That was the beginning of the end for Freaknik. I do have great memories when I used to enjoy it as a partier, and I have memories of now as an officer who's responsible for being part of the enforcement of shutting it down.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you something. You said you were giving us pointers, like if you're in a stampede in a club, but what if you're like in the open air, like outside, like in Astroworld? What do you do? Any tips and what can you do to survive that? Is there anything you can do?
Yeah, like I told you, first of all, don't try to stay out the middle of the crowd. That's the most dangerous spot. It's like on a highway. You ever see people driving in packs on a highway? The lead vehicle is not going to be the threat, or shall I say, it's not going to be the victim. Everybody driving the pack, the most dangerous part in the crowd is right in the middle. It doesn't matter. Action. When one incident starts, it's a chain reaction. And everything behind that initial event is going to be caught up in the fatality of it. When people surge, they tend to search for in the middle area is the most dangerous. That's the reason in hurricane, there's a thing called the eye of the hurricane. It may seem calm and may be safe, but that's the most dangerous part of that hurricane. People tend to think that when a panic starts, well, first thing they do is panic and then you trying to stop or you trying to figure out, and it happens so quick your mind don't have time to process it. But if you develop a survival skill, you quickly, as you move forward, don't never against a surge, you move forward and keep pushing your way toward a wall. Not stand in front of a wall, not getting set, but you're going along with the crowd against the wall. Because you know what? To me, the wall is safety. That's the reason I drive on the left lane of the highway. I only have to worry about the 3 other lanes to my right. And you go against the wall because regardless of how much the crowd is pushing you, going against the wall and don't allow yourself to get pinned against the wall, because then you're going to end up dead. Go with the crowd.
Like by the stage, and you're like, what do? You hit the stage. I mean,
Then jump the stage. And that's what people don't understand. It's a tidal wave of people coming, jump the damn stage. First of all, security broke down if the surge is already taken over toward the stage. There's only so much they can hold back. If you smart, instead of you waiting for the wave to hit you, jump the stage, because in times of crowds, high ground is always the safety.
Wow. So you keep talking about hanging to the wall, but again, like if you're outside and there are no walls, you basically still go towards the edge.
Yeah, you go to, that's the safest place toward the edge.
You can't move. That's
Yeah, those people couldn't move. They couldn't move.
One guy said he put his hand up and he couldn't, it was so packed that he couldn't move his hand down. He had to keep it up in the air because he couldn't even put his hand down.
Listen, if you've been in these environments, you quickly learn. It's like, Norm, remember when they taught us in defensive tactics that safety, that distance is safety. Even in a crowd, you keep your hands, when the crowd start, you keep your hands in front of you. If you're being pushed from behind, push from in front. Why? Because as long as you can keep at least 6 inches to 12 inches of distance, even in a packed crowd, you use your arm to create a buffer, because that's how you keep your air coming. Your lungs are an instrument that still need to inhale and exhale. You don't need 5-6 feet to be safe. You need 6 inches.
So you put your arms out in front of you, you're saying?
Keep it.
Yeah, I don't think that was possible.
And that may not have been possible, but at that point in time, if you're in the middle of that crowd, it really, going back to what you asked, what could have been prevented it? Nothing. Because if you're in the middle of that crowd and you're already in what we call the danger zone, then you are just going to be a victim of circumstances.
Mhm.
And there's nothing that could have been done to prevent it.
See, there has to be things you can do to prevent things from happening, planning, whatever. I mean, I don't know what that would involve, but there have to be things they could have done in planning.
Well, there's always things in planning. There's barriers set up. There's officers there. There's always all these proactive means of saying, well, this is in place. But again, Doc, as you've seen in various concerts over the last 20, 30 years, no matter what you put in to be prevented or crowd control, people would defeat in numbers. You guys ever watch football teams and the underdog team beat a Division I rival house, and all of a sudden the stadium's empty and all these kids are thousands of people running onto the field?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So again, you brought in here, crowd control was great as long as that game was going on, but the excitement of it, and how many law enforcement you see try to stop that crowd, eventually you have to get out the way and let it roll. And next thing you know, you got 50, 60,000 people jumping up and down in excitement on that field.
I don't think that you can control a situation where you have people treated as if they were in a cattle corral, and it's just not possible to control that, because one way or another you're going to get hurt. If you're on the
Absolutely.
outside, you don't know which way that monster is going to move. So there's no safe place. And you're talking about having air and maintaining space. These are people there were people who were trying to move who couldn't move. They were just caught up with the crowd. They just were pushed along with the crowd. There was no, okay, I'm going to push you away from me. They couldn't even get their arms and hands up. And it's just that, and I'm going to say this again, it doesn't take a genius to know that this is a dangerous atmosphere to be in. And that's how you prevent it. And people, I say it again, people who attend these type of events don't have critical thinking skills, because you know that you're walking into something dangerous. And people who have joy in death, that's a sociopathic tendency to see. You want to go to an event where people die and people get hurt and you enjoying that. That's a sociopathic tendency. And you have to look at that.
Like Travis Scott, like I said, I didn't know who he was, but anything about him.
Right.
But I looked at 3 of his videos. Oh my God, people are getting killed. It's violent. Yes. I mean, it's just, I was really shocked. I mean, they're all very violent. I mean, that's the kind of mentality of people who are attending, that kind of concert, violence and death and horror and all of that. Oh my God, they were like, it was really frightening looking at his videos. I can't believe people are into this and watching it. It was just horrible.
They need to stop licensing those type of events.
Well, because the one that he had last year, he didn't have one because of the pandemic. But the previous year, there were some incidents. I don't think people were killed, but there were injuries at the previous one that he held. But that's the kind of thing he promotes. There was
a concert here. I want to say not Alpharetta, but somewhere in that area that was canceled last year. They wouldn't give the people a permit because they had a reputation for destroying property at their events, and so they wouldn't give them a permit. It's one of the top rap people.
Really?
Can't think of what. Yeah, that happened in this area.
Really?
Where they denied the people the license, and there was a big brouhaha about it. And that's what they have to do.
Okay.
That's what you have to do. You have, even here, if you go to Cobb, not the Cobb Galleria, but wherever the Cobb Center, wherever it is, where they have that amphitheater, at 10 o'clock, 10:15, you're out of there. They have strict rules.
Oh, the Cobb Energy Performing Center, yeah.
Correct. They have strict rules. And once you begin to eliminate strict rules that control people's behavior and access, that's when you allow for things like this to happen. And it's sad because people die. And I a 14-year-old boy did, a 9-year-old boy who's flirting with death because he had an idiotic parent who thought that it was a good idea to take his 9-year-old and put him on his shoulders in a crowd of 50,000 people. makes a lot of sense to me.
Mm. Wow. Wow.
But
I'm thinking
people
like
have,
when I was little, I was thinking like in Milwaukee, growing up, my father used to take us to the lake to see the fireworks, and there were crowds of people there. But we were kids and it was night, but there was never any issue. I don't remember any problems. We would go see the fireworks, and there'd be crowds of people watching the fireworks at the lake.
I'm saying that's what I said earlier. Different times, different thought process with people, where people respected people, and that doesn't occur anymore.
Guys, y'all got to keep in mind. I hear you. You guys are talking from the rational, I don't do that society. And out of fairness, you guys are no longer the majority in this country, much less in this world. And I know it makes sense not to do the things that we witness at these concerts, but people have been doing this since the beginning of time. And no matter how rational it makes sense not to take a 9-year-old or 14-year-old or any minor to these kind of events, it still was a parent present who not only thought it was okay, but actively participated in these as well. It ain't like these kids snuck out by themselves and went to these concerts and parents not knowing about it. Like you said, Norm, it was an idiotic move on the parents' fault, because I myself was like wondering, what the hell was you thinking? But you got to keep in mind, there are those who thrive in these type of events, those who really enjoy this. And you also got to look at the diversity of the crowd. You can't even say it was a Black mentality or a white mentality or a Hispanic mentality. This was a people going out, doing what we do to say we enjoying our quality of life mentality. If it didn't turn into a stampede with fatalities, it would have been a great concert to some. The others would have been like, oh my God, the noise complaint. Like you said about Carb Energy, well, they shut it down. It's because they have very set curfew. That's the reason you hold concerts like the Riot in places where they're a lot more lenient and not necessarily within residential areas where there'd be complaints. I've been to concerts in the middle of nowhere. Like Woodstock was in the middle of nowhere in a farm in upstate New York. Not only was there peace and love at Woodstock, but you also got to keep in mind the weather itself didn't contribute. Because if I remember, Woodstock was mainly rainy, wet, cold, and funky.
Right.
But at the same time, human nature and the pursuit of happiness doesn't always equal rationality and common sense.
Of course, like I said, it's a crowd mentality, the herd mentality, pack mentality. It has nothing to do. And I think people seek the lowest common denominator of emotions, very primitive emotions.
But ask yourself, Prince and Michael Jackson both died from drug use where fentanyl was prevalent. These are two of the most high-profile performers currently in the world. And yet, their passing didn't deter people from doing it. It's like, oh my God, this stuff is incredible. I got to try it myself. You know how many deaths in just the US alone from fentanyl that's become like the most popular drug to lace your weed with, combined with Michael Williams just passed, combination of cocaine and fentanyl.
I'm director of a methadone clinic. I see it all the time. Our people are all coming in positive for fentanyl with the past. And they just said they didn't use only like some cocaine or marijuana, but they're lacing everything with the fentanyl. So yeah.
So back in the 70s, they had angel dust.
They had angel dust, LSD, and acid.
Yeah. So I mean, all of it was deadly.
And at this
it's not deterring people, it's exciting people.
Right. They ran out of Narcan at this concert. They said they ran out of Narcan. There were so many people who they had overdosed that they ran out of Narcan at this concert.
So even if it wasn't the stampede and the trampling, imagine the overdoses that would have happened. People ODing, because these are the kind of concerts you come to get high, you come to get let loose. And at the end of the day, ask yourself, how many people might have survived if they wasn't under the influence of something where they can respond instantly to these threats?
Okay. Well,
No.
this has been a very lively discussion, and we're at the end of our time. And I want to thank our co-host and our listening audience. This has been a very interesting, fruitful discussion. So be safe out there.